Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. We are making our way through the wonderful Season 3 of Korra. Book 3 I should say, and we are on the 11th episode. No? 11th? 10th? No, 11th. Damn, we are at the 11th episode of Korra.
You literally... I just marked the file and went 3.10, and you literally went, I went 3.11. Yeah, 11. And you literally went, yeah, it's 11.
Yeah.
Like with
It's
such
funny,
certainty.
isn't it, when you actually are doing an intro for a thing, how much your brain leaves you. Like when when you sort of feel like when you switch into presenter mode, it's like a different human being that doesn't have the thoughts and experiences of the person you were 30 seconds ago. When I was younger, they had a built-in live TV studio into Stockport College, and everyone was part of their module had to produce a sort of like This Morning-esque or The One Show-esque sort of quote-unquote live show from that studio as part of one of their modules. But no one wanted to present them. Everyone was, everyone's students, and no one's going and hiring someone to do it. So it was just the most confident kids would do it. And I spent a week presenting everyone's. Like, everyone's video had the same presenter, except for like two people, and it was me. And one of the ones that didn't have me in it was my own, because I was up in the booth producing it. And like there were points, Chris, when I genuinely like lost my mind in front of camera. Like there was a point, and it was really funny because the guy was so sarcastic. Like I'd made a joke that they put this like random empty glass on the table next to me for like set dressing, but it was filthy and you could see it on the camera. So I was like, in my head, I went, clock that. That'll be a funny little bit I can do between the readings later. And then there was just this horrible, awkward moment where I tried to make that a bit, but didn't give it the gusto it needed, the energy it needed. I was just like, look, it's dirty, and I just like it just awkward. It landed like a lead balloon. None of the, because usually with a show like that, you get the cameraman and the crew laughing, right? No laughter, silence, and I just awkwardly put the glass back. I read the rest of my teleprompter, and then they cut to break, and I just see the floor manager put his finger to his ear and go, no, he knew he was on. Yeah, that was part of the show. It's one of the most brutal things that's ever happened. Like,
oh, that's really brutal.
He basically did air quotes without doing air quotes. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, man.
Yeah, so it's funny sometimes how your brain can abandon you when you're like sort of presenting something. Because the reality is, Chris, I think there's an element of being automatic when I'm introducing the show. Hello, welcome to Analysing Avatar. This week we're on Book 3 of Korra. We're doing episode... Like, I'm not thinking when that's happening. That's just happening. Do you know what I mean? So, and then by the time I realise I have to say something specific that's unique to this episode, which episode 11, then I'm going, oh shit, which one is it? Like, I'm panicking because then I've suddenly caught out by the realisation that I have to re-engage my brain. I'd be a terrible presenter is basically what I'm telling the audience. Anyway,
the audience listening to you present a show as we
shh, it's secret. Thank you, Nadia. Nadia's brought me tea because she's delightful. She gave me the peace sign. She's very peacefully leaving the room. Bless her. She's just like they gotta work. It's important work they're doing. She says with air quotes. Anyway, it's all right, Chris. That was just part of the show. Shall we talk about Korra?
Let's do it.
I will never forget that for my life because it was such a humiliating but humbling moment. Do you know what I mean?
I do love the imagery. Yep, no, that was part of it.
Yep. He wasn't making eye contact with me while he said it either. He was sort of like slightly turning away. Like he didn't want to have to look at it. Oh, God. And the worst part is... The worst part is knowing that that's in someone's like work they submitted for their course. Do you know what I mean? Like that moment, that utter failure.
It's probably like the example of not what to do still.
Right. But look, here's the thing: you've got to be trained on what to do when your talent is shit. That's the. What do you do on this morning?
It's like TV.
What do you do on this morning when the guest is shit? That's the question. Anyway, this, for those who don't remember, is the episode of Korra where Mako and Bolin reach Korra with the message they received from Zahir last week, and the message was very simple. It was an ultimatum, hence the title of the episode. Surrender yourself to us, or we're going after the Air Nation. Now, that's very smart from Zahir's position. He understands exactly what Korra values and wants, and reviving the Air Nation is high on her list. She's very attached to Tenzin. She's very attached to the Air Nation. She knows it's as the Avatar, to one of her jobs of bringing balance back requires it almost. Even if on a personal level she wasn't invested in that, it's literally her job as Avatar. So he very wisely understands that that's what she wants to achieve and puts that on the line. And then we see Zahir go after the Air Temple. Korra too far away to be able to do anything about it, and then we get these incredible sequences, all sort of alongside Korra formulating a plan to try and help, basically. And there's some stuff with Zuki-Pews that's quite fun. I say fun, enjoyable. We'll come back to. Well, I have a small criticism, but we'll come back to that. So yeah, that's what happens in this episode. I believe it ends with Tenzin captured, Kai on a sky bison, and did everyone else get away? I can't remember. Is that bad? I only watched this.
It's unclear. We see the sky bisons move to catch Kai, but the last shot of the airbenders is Jinora yelling after Kai, basically after seeing him seemingly explode.
We don't know if they got away or not.
No, not as far as I could tell. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's there. So let's get into it, Chris. What did you think? It's a pivotal episode. I would argue. Well, how did you? Well, certainly in terms of moving the pieces around. But yeah, go on.
I really enjoyed it. I thought it compared, because the last few episodes have been like, oh, that was great, that was amazing, that was Star Wars, and I think it's not a criticism of this episode because it was really, really good. I don't think it was as strong as the last couple, and I think the reason for that is that the writing of the last couple has been so... And this episode shows how strong the writing of the whole season is. Like, when Lynn's sister is like, I never should have sent Opal. I'm like, oh God, that's so clever. Like, you've given her a reason to be panicked. You've given jeopardy for like everyone by this situation. That's why Opal's at the temple. So the writing of the plotting of the whole season is clearly intricate and brilliant. I think with this episode specifically, one of the strengths of recent episodes has been the script's juggling of like 3 different plots and them weaving them together and being able to do so much within the episodes. Now, I think the things in this episode get the concentration they need, but it kind of goes Marco Bolin, Air Temple, and it doesn't cut between those things. It's like literally an episode of 2 halves.
Right?
Probably not exactly.
No, I think you're right. I think it's Mako Bolin getting to Korra formulating the plan, and then they literally goes plot. It's the 3 plots. It starts with Mako Bolin getting to Korra, then it's Korra and her plan formulating because she knows Zahir's there. That plot sort of ends with her getting through to the Air Temple, but it's too late, and then it's Air Temple action till the end.
Yeah, and I think it absolutely works for this episode. I would not even criticizing the episode as such, but I feel like it would be disingenuous to not acknowledge that the last 2-3 episodes have started with me going, that was amazing, I loved it, and this is starting with me going, yeah, that was really good, and I felt like I needed to explain the difference between the 2 levels of enthusiasm, and I think that is the difference. I think it's the right decision for this episode, but it feels like you say plot, and that's fine. Like, that's not a problem at all. I think especially when viewed in the context of the 3rd episode from the finale. It feels like that. It feels like the middle act. It feels like the absolute middle act of a finale. And that's fine. Like, I haven't got an issue with that at all. I think it was great. I think the action scenes were great. But I felt like I needed to work out why I wasn't going, that was stunning, and I think that's why.
Do you think episodes like this are an unintended consequence of structuring a show like this in a sort of serialized way versus episodic? Because this episode feels like it's joining together what probably will be what was the middle act of this story, building up to Zahir revealing his plan, to a confrontation between Korra and Zahir. And this feels like a step on that path that needed to happen. And the other episodes had a lot of character work built in alongside the plot stuff, whereas this felt a little more, I don't think completely, we'll talk about, there is some good character stuff in this, but I don't think it's as entwined, and I don't think it's as deep as the character stuff we've had in the last, 5, 6, maybe even 7 episodes of the show. But, so I guess my question is, do you think that's just a consequence of this structure that is unavoidable, or do you think there's something they could have done differently?
I think it's unavoidable. I think that, you can't run these plots side by side. They literally happen as a result of each other. I think I would rather this than Korra does something else while Marco and Bolin race towards her. I think there's a world that the only thing you could have potentially done to avoid it, if I'm honest, is I think there's a world where you just have Marco and Bolin turn up and find them and start there. But I like the stuff with their grandmother. I like their escape from Ba Sing Se. I like all of that stuff. Yeah. So I think it's a consequence, and I think it's fine. Like I think it works. I just think it's interesting because it does make you feel at the very least that the writing was perhaps tighter the last few weeks. Well, maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure the writing necessarily was tighter so much as that this episode just chose to be something else. I think there are hints of the world building and the character work in this episode. It's just this episode needs to do a lot of plot stuff to give us the finale and the story that it's trying to tell. Like, I think that's just like, as I land on the side of this is a consequence of the structure of doing a serialized show. Episodes like this, we've talked about them before, piece moving episodes where your chessboard's not quite set up for your finale. You've got to do something to get them there. The question is, how naturally can you do it alongside character work and all the other stuff? And I think of Korra's now 3 seasons, I think this is the best version of this kind of episode we've had.
I think that's fair.
Over the 2 seasons we've seen so far prior to this one. I think this is I think this is a really great episode, and I think there's a lot of really good stuff to break down from it. I think there's a lot of really interesting elements to it. One moment of frustration, but we'll come to that. Let's start where you were just talking about. Let's break this down in order. I guess it makes sense to do it since these plots happen sort of leading into the next. Let's break down how that works. So let's the first chunk is the Marco Bolin chunk. I loved all this stuff. I thought it was very funny. I think again, there's an interesting element to the chaos that has ensued from the Earth Queen's death, and what that's saying about society and what maybe message they're trying to get across politically. I discussed last week a little sleepily, so I don't know if I articulated it very well because that was an early record for me. Chris has got that distinct honor today. Chris is in the wee hours, so I'm gonna. I hopefully won't ramble quite as much as I'm sure I did last time. Until Chris can take that crown.
If you're thinking Chris is using a kind of a more sultry, quieter voice, that, my friends, is for the neighbours in a hope not to wake them up.
Yeah. So
it's really annoying because we I think I've talked about this before. We never hear our neighbours, and I still don't know whether the houses are just the soundproofing on the houses are particularly good, or whether it's just I'm the loud one.
I think at some point,
Do you know what I mean?
I think at some point you're going to have to just knock on their door and say, "Hi, I'm Chris. I live next door. I'm really sorry, but I want to know for my own peace of mind if we're disturbing you or not, so I can adjust if need be." When I record these podcasts, they're just dumb podcasts, just talking about TV and stuff. But do you hear that when it's happening? If so, are there any like hard cut-offs you'd like time-wise? Make it look like you're doing them a favour. You know, do I need to be done by 9 o'clock because you've got kids? Do I need to be done or do I need to start after a certain time because you work late? Do you know what I mean? Like, just see what they say. I think you might be surprised, and they might just go, "No, I don't think so." Because you know, I've been around your place, and I've also never heard your neighbours, and I feel like I would have. Like, I don't think,
yeah.
There's
and
no
I think
way they're not
also
talking ever. Do you know what I mean?
Well, they when the side in this room that would be most effective also once said to us when they first moved in, "Oh, we watch a lot of movies like late at night. If that ever disturbs you, please let us know." And it's never heard it, so I think it's fine. But yeah, anyway, Marco and Berlin, I agree. Sorry, you were saying because you were saying about sleepiness, and that's what led us here. Sorry, I don't.
Oh yeah, sorry. So I was just saying that the politics are a bit messy, basically, and I'm sure I've got lots of lovely comments from the previous week where I didn't explain my thinking. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it, because I think on one hand you could argue that this show is making a point to stick with the status quo and trust in the institutions, and I think that's bad. But I also think utter chaos, governments collapsing, is also bad. So I think it's
hot takes from Dan.
Yeah, I happen to think that the systems we have should be broken down and re-looked at. A lot of them have been in place for an extremely long period of time, and we're more willing to experiment with the recipes of the bloody foods we eat as time moves on than we are our governmental systems, which actually run our lives. So I think we need to be more willing to go, well, that worked, a couple hundred years ago. Do we need to reassess this? Formula One reassess their rule sets every few years, and yet the governments of the world are like, nah, this voting system works perfectly. Electoral college, yeah, that seems fine. First past the post, we love that. So, I worry that this show could be construed, or at least this season of this show could be construed as having the message of stick with the status quo, and I feel like that is a dangerous message, because I do think the status quo is very broken, as has been proven by the last, I don't know, forever. Fuck it, like time has proven that true. So I'm in a weird position of like having mixed feelings on the political angle of this season, because I'm worried what its message is, but I also don't want it to sound like I'm coming down on Zahir's side for utter chaos and anarchy either, because I also don't want deaths, because that's also not good, or suffering on a large scale. So it's really interesting watching the opening of this episode, which I think actually, to your point, I don't actually think I would cut. If someone said to me we could cut to Marco and Bolin arriving at Korra, I would go, ooh, that's good for the Korra plot. But I think it would hurt the wider plot of Zahir's interactions with the world and what his choices are actually, what effect that's taking. We'd be sat here going, well, he killed the Earth Queen. What are the consequences of that? We didn't see it. Do you know what I mean? So here
I agree.
So here we are in a situation where, like, we got to see, sections of the city literally burning, looting happening on a mass scale. Marco and Bolin's delightful family in physical danger from these choices, right? And I'm glad we're seeing that from a television show perspective, stripping my own personal politics out of it. Zahir has been framed as correct in theory, but doing evil in practice, right? This is guy with a bad guy with a point. We've talked about this before. So getting to demonstrate that and reinforce that point is really important. Really, really important. And I'm sitting here, like, sort of saying, this episode has some arguably less important stuff in just Marco and Bolin's journey to thingy, but I think it's doing a lot for the overall plot, as well as giving us some delightful fun times with Mako and Bolin's family, because they are hilarious. Their Gran is slowly becoming my favourite character. Her refusal to leave, even when he gives them the whole "home is where your family is" speech, she's still like, no, I'm gonna stay, which is great. I love her realising that she hasn't got a choice than taking the photo. I also love later on in the episode where they're all saying like, I'm gonna do this, and she's like, I'm gonna take a nap. Like, she is a delight.
Bearing in mind, she's never been to that place before. So the true funniness of I've got to take a nap is like, I've got to find where to nap and then take a nap.
Oh, that's great. Apparently that line was added while recording by one of the writers who was present. They just thought it was funny and suggested it to the voice actress, and she did it, and they kept it in. Delightful. Yes, keep that in, please. Good move. Good choice. So I think that plot does a lot for that. I didn't care so much. I tell you the bit they could have snipped is them tracing it back. Oh, there are the tracks from the wreckage. We know where they've gone. I think it would have been smart of them to just go, well, I'll tell you what, we know that they were on their way from Misty Palms to here, so we'll just do that journey in reverse until we find Korra. Oh, we're back at Misty Palms. Oh, and there's the dragon. That's Zuko, so let's get off here. Yeah, then there's Korra. We could have done that and saved a lot of time there, I think. But I really, really enjoyed seeing the state of the city and fearing for the people of the city. You know, my whole thing with the Earth Queen was, hey, she's very bad for these people. What's happening right now doesn't seem a huge amount better. And I know they play a lot of jokes with it, and I'm sure one criticism people would have is the looters trying to get in and being like, you can't stop us, and the guy being like, stop you? I know where the good stuff is, which is a good joke. I think somebody could criticize it of saying like it's making light of what is a really serious situation for the city. Also the joke when they're all picking apart the airship and Bolin's like, oh, the Queen keeps all the good stuff on the third floor, and they all run off. But I think it's just about balanced with the seriousness of the situation for Mako and Bolin's family. So I would understand somebody with that criticism, but I wouldn't feel it myself. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that opening section. I don't know if you have anything you wanted to cover on that opening portion of the episode.
No, I agree. I think I'd just be repeating what you've just said. No, I completely agree.
Well, let's have a chat then about you can take a chunk and jump on in about like the sort of the middle portion. So the middle portion is the formulating a plan portion of the episode. It also involves Korra visiting the spirit world and meeting Iroh, who's back, and it's a good fun moment. How did you feel about the sort of middle portion of the episode?
Yeah, I think it was. I think visiting the spirit world made a lot of sense as a plan.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Iroh of it all, and even like them writing around sort of the coincidence of it by almost leaning into that and being like Iroh being like, "Oh, the spirit world always helps you find what you need to."
Sure.
I thought was good. I thought it was nice that we linked back to, Korra not being able to remember her past lives.
Yes.
And that being a real difficulty here and not being able to get their advice. That's the first time we've sort of leaned on that since it happened. But it's very effective. I think you understand her fear and her worry here. I won't talk about Zuko's because that's sort of, I feel like you've got a lot of comments on that. So I'll wait for that. If it counts as the middle portion, I thought the action was great, and they did, and especially, most people wouldn't be watching it with this tease, but and it's not so much what you said about there's another gruesome death coming, but I think because of the Earth Queen last week, now the violence has such stakes. The moment where what's the name of the Red Lotus member with the water and the arms?
Oh,
the water arms.
Oh, yeah. 1 second, let me bring it up. I had it in front of me. It's funny. I literally brought up the cast list and the names of all the characters so that if that happened, I'd be able to reference it. And at some point, I've scrolled away from it, which is absolutely stupid. Minghua.
So when she's fighting with Tenzin's sisters, whose name I've also forgotten, and it looks like those Kaya, and it looks like those shards of ice are going to like slice her up.
Yeah.
Like you feel the jeopardy of that. Like you really feel the jeopardy of that. And I was like, oh no, like is this going to be the violent death? It's funny that that Tenzin's like Kaya and Boomy. Like I understand Kaya, but it feels like with Boomy, he's just like you're old, like you've got some experience. But then
I said exactly this to Nadia. I said I felt sorry for Boomy. He's no more practiced than the children they just sent the other way, and they're like, "Boomy, get in here. You're an adult." And I said that to Nadia, and Nadia's response was, "Yeah, but he was like a general in the war, and he's like he has fought." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess that's true." Like he's not.
Well, what I love is they're very in this fight where we've got Boomy who's only just become an airbender, and we've got Kai who's a young cocky child. I think what's effective is they held them off with things that are realistic to them. So Boomy then bites the dude, like, and tricks him by going like getting underneath him and going up and round and bites him. Kai, does the thing with the tool. It's my turn to be sleepy. What's that tool that they use to fly in this show?
The glider.
Yeah. Glider. No. Kai is a distraction. Kai becomes.
That tool, that thing. What's the thing? The thing. Just like all I'm thinking of doing is just being like, yeah, apparently that's all part of the show. That was your dirty glass moment. I feel your brain left you.
Yeah.
In the wrong moment.
Potentially. It's very early. It's the earliest either of us have ever done a podcast this.
Yeah,
and it was a mistake.
And it was an accident. It was a cock up that we were recording this early. Chris didn't realise what time he'd booked it for, and I didn't look at what time Chris would be recording because it mattered not to me because I'm in a different time zone. And I was just like, what's that? 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Delightful. Not realising that meant 6 a.m. for Chris, which meant waking up at 5 to watch the show. It's brutal. Anyway,
but Kai, we've seen Kai is good with a glider. It felt like there's two things that I think are quite clever about these fights. At no point does it feel like our heroes have the upper hand, which wouldn't make sense given how powerful they've made the Red Lotus appear. And equally, their fighting skills and styles, and the reason they were able to fend them off at most, matches the level that we've seen. Boomy biting him, Tenzin using just brute force air skills, Kai running away on a glider to distract and stuff. All of these things felt incredibly consistent with the characters, and I like the fact that they didn't beat them, but they literally were just able to fend them off for a bit. If they were suddenly able to beat these guys, you'd be like, we've seen these guys take out, trained armies. But I think everything about it made sense, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think like it was really clever, and the way they've choreographed these fights, because they're both... there's a real balance they strike here, which I really appreciated, of being interesting to look at and exciting to watch, while sort of playing into each of the people in question's strengths, and for those who were not strong enough to win, having them be smart enough to realize that and not just get their asses handed to them, and instead trying to be smart about it. I like seeing our heroes think their way out of being overpowered. That's exciting. That's exciting on its own. So you've got Kaya, who is capable as a waterbender, but still a bit outclassed by Minghua, but holding her own, and they're having this great battle, But at the same time, so you've got those two who are sort of maybe not exactly on the same level, but pretty close. And the same with Zahir and Tenzin, it seems. Although it feels like Tenzin's beating Zahir until the others join, but we'll come back to that. But and then you've got this, these sort of more mismatched fights, like the mismatched. I got there in the end. Mismatched fights where you've got Kai trying to distract Sparky Boom Girl, who's I know that's not her name, and I know they landed on a different name in the original Avatar for. Is it Combustion Man? So Combustion Lady, I guess would be the phrase. But I quite like Sparky Boom Girl. Anyway, you got Kai sort of solving that problem with just by being brave, and I think as well, what a great way to show us Kai's growth by doing the least selfish thing he could choose to do in that moment. Remember earlier in the season when you weren't sure they'd be able to redeem Kai? You were like, I don't know. I don't know about this kid. But having him sacrifice himself to give the other guys a chance to get out, it doesn't work, admittedly. I double-checked, by the way, and the last shot we see of the Airbenders is Kai is distracting Sparky Boom Lady, and he gets hit by one of them and starts falling, and they're all halfway to the bisons, and they look up and she looks down and they sort of clock eyes, and that's where it cuts away and we don't come back to them. So I guess the implication is they're captured or at least stuck there, because if they made a dash for the bison, she was going to blow them away. So they were sort of held in place. Her instructions are not to just murder indiscriminately. Their whole point is capture the Airbenders until Korra turns herself in. Killing them now would only leave Korra in a position where she goes, well, I'm not going to come then, am I? Obviously, you've killed the only leverage you had. So that's where that leaves off. So yeah, I think the fights are great. I think the fights are really, really spectacular in this episode, and I really enjoyed the tension of it, and I really liked the sort of Empire Strikes Back downer ending. That shot of Tenzin when he gets ganged up on by all, three of the guys that are on the ground, and he's like, I'm never going to give up. And he's like bruised, he's got a black eye, his robes are torn, and they do that brilliant thing where like he's breathing heavy and the camera pans across just as they start launching attacks. And the camera goes behind the wall so you don't see it, but you hear it. Oh, man.
It's brutal.
Oof. Brutal. I mean, that's almost more brutal than showing it, right? Like, like I think
because
it's chilling.
It's your imagination,
right?
It's literally as violent as you're imagining it to be. It was very, and obviously this presumably came first, but it was very. I could do this all day, wasn't it? It was very Captain America.
Yeah. I think it's good. Did this come first? I want to know. I want to know. No, First Avenger came first. This arguably was copying that. But I think actually one of the bigger and more interesting character beats of this week's story is accidentally lost in the structure. Because I think if the two stories were able to happen alongside each other, like Korra was trying to reach Zahir, but he was already there, but she doesn't know that until right at the end of the episode, right? So propose a slight rejig of the episode, and I'll explain why afterwards. But imagine a version of the episode where she can't get through and she doesn't know why. We keep cutting back from the fight to her, and she's figuring out her plan, going to the spirit world, and we're cutting back to see how things are developing there. We have the shot of Tenzin being beaten up, and then we cut back to Korra, and maybe through the spirit world or something, maybe Tenzin finally connects with her and she understands what's happening, and she's like, that's why we can't get through to them. Zahir's already there. We're too late. And we end on that note. The reason I think doing it that way might be better is Korra's plot of going into the spirit world in the middle of this episode. She has this, I find, actually, a little bit frustrating conversation with Zuko. So there's two reasons it's frustrating. So in the spirit world, she speaks to Iroh, and Iroh says, well, you want to speak to your past lives, but while you can't do that, you do have access to Zuko, and Zuko was a great friend of Aang's. If you want to know how Aang would have handled this, maybe speak to Zuko. She speaks to Zuko, and what Zuko essentially says is the least helpful thing a human being could say. He goes, well, Aang was very connected to the Airbenders. And she's like, oh, cool. So protect the Airbenders then, even at the cost of myself. And then he's like, but of course, Aang understood more than anybody the importance of the Avatar, which is like the opposite thing. And she's like, oh, I guess I am more important, so I don't go then. Like, it's the most useless advice I've ever heard anyone give anyone. He basically tells her to do both things, which is not helpful, in my opinion. But what I think is... So that's frustrating, right? And then the second frustration... Actually, no, we'll say the second frustration, because that's a proper complaint. This is just something to do with the wider plot. But the episode almost makes up for that, right? With what they do with Tenzin. Because Tenzin is the closest thing we have in this show to Aang, right? He was Aang's son, raised by Aang, has Aang's values. And he is sat down with Zahir, and Zahir says, you can peacefully give in and just come with us, and we're just going to wait for Korra to come. Or you can risk your entire air nation by trying to fight us now to save Korra. Tenzin chooses to fight. And in that moment, we, the audience, know what Aang would have done, in my opinion. Because Tenzin chooses to fight to protect Korra over the survival of the Air Nation. He risks the Air Nation to save Korra. So he obviously feels Korra should stay away. Wouldn't it have been amazing to line up those plot lines so that juxtaposition of Korra wondering what Aang would have done alongside Tenzin demonstrating? That's why I think maybe they should have actually chopped up the plots a little bit more, because I think there's a real powerful idea in there, you know, it's lost in the structure because the Korra scene happens so much earlier in the episode than the Tenzin scene that you've really got to be thinking back to link the two in a way that I think is, and I'm not saying only a genius will see this, you know, this is, you know, but I'm just saying I think it would have been clearer and it would have been more powerful in how it landed. I think most people watching it will probably see that parallel, but it would have landed harder had they been next to each other, I think, and had more impact. So yeah, I talked for a long time there. I don't know. Sorry.
No, I think that's a fair comment, and I think it's a really interesting angle. I hadn't thought of that, about the notion of Tenzin basically representing what Aang would have done. But I think it's a good interpretation of it. I think it's hard. You know, it's maybe harder to get that across. You know, I don't know if you have Korra seeing what, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how you would execute it cleanly, but I like the notion a lot, for sure.
Well, Korra doesn't need to see him make the choice, I don't think. But I think the audience need to have her go, these are the two options, what would Aang have done? And then cut to Tenzin making that choice so that you, the audience, understand. I think it would have paralleled better having the two scenes basically next to each other, which is not what ends up happening, I don't think, in the show. Actually, how far away are those two scenes? Oh, they're not that far. 5 minutes or so. So Tenzin attacks Zahir and makes his choice at 15 minutes into the episode. Korra's chat with Zuko is 11 minutes into the episode. 12. So actually, to be fair, there are only 3 or 4 minutes between the two moments. So actually, maybe I'm talking shite. Anyway, I'm going to quickly lay out my other thing that annoys me, and I want your thoughts on this, Chris, because I want to know if I'm being unreasonable. So I'm going to very quickly lay it out and not ramble, and then I'm going to let you tell me if I'm being stupid or not. Did it feel in the moment when Zuko says, "You spoke to my uncle"? And she's like, "Yeah, actually, it's not even the first time I spoke to him. I've met him in the spirit world before." And then Bolin or Mako, I can't remember which, but one of them shows up like, "Here I am to interrupt you, so we don't actually have to have a response." From Zuko was not like one of the most frustrating choices in any episode of the show. All I wanted was just a moment of Zuko acknowledging his missing Iroh, feeling that loss, being almost jealous, like maybe of Korra, or just being like thrilled to hear that she got wisdom from his uncle, sorry. And instead, we just have him go, "You spoke to my uncle," and then we interrupt the conversation. It felt like the writers didn't know. This is my contention. It felt to me like the writers didn't know how to have Zuko react, so they avoided having to write it. That's what it felt like to me, and I found that deeply frustrating. Did you feel the same way?
It was frustrating, but I think what I seem to, and I'm just checking now, I in my head, the interruption was more valid. Like, I remember thinking, oh, well, of course they're not going to have this conversation because...
well, the interruption is that the interruption is a valid interruption. It's like we've got through to the air temple, absolutely. But the writers chose to have that happen there. You know what I mean? That's a choice.
Yeah, I kind of think it's meant to be frustrating. Like, I shared your frustration of, oh, how's Zuko going to react? What's that conversation going to be? But then when they're interrupted, I'm like, we won't get to see it. Like,
But what would be what's the purpose of that from a storytelling perspective of frustrating us on that front? Like, if you're implying that, or suggesting they made that choice with intent, and not because they just didn't have the answer to the question of how would Zuko respond. If it's your idea that they were just intentionally frustrating us, to what end? How is that enhancing this story?
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, I take your point. It bothered me, but not in a more in a I would have loved to have known what he said way, and like they got me, rather than they got me. Like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So I've got the line,
but I definitely
up in front of me.
I definitely noted it. I was definitely like, I would have loved to have known what Zuko's reaction to that was. And I suppose you're right. There's no reason not to show us.
Yeah, just give us one more sentence from Zuko. And it wouldn't have needed to have been much to satisfy me. I honestly just would have been like, oh, I look forward to speaking to him myself one day. Delightful. Fine. Good. 10 points. That's, you know what I mean? Like, Zuko, like, having any kind of response at all would have been better than no response. And I've got the dialogue here. It's your uncle was right. It was helpful talking to you. Wait, you spoke with my uncle? Yeah, in the spirit world a couple of times actually. And then it's, guys, we got through to the air temple, and then we just don't get a response. It's so frustrating. And it's right after Zuko gave Korra essentially the worst advice anyone has ever given anyone. And I think it is very on brand for Zuko to give poor advice. But no, the show doesn't acknowledge that as that. Korra acts like that was helpful. She literally says thanks, and Korra's like, it was helpful talking to you. I'm like, he just laid out the dilemma, is what he did. Oh, that's has got you in a real tricky position, because the Airbenders are the closest to Aang's heart, but the world needs its avatar. You can't sacrifice yourself for that. Ooh, that's all he says. It's so useless. Oh man,
there was no real Zuko awkwardness. We talked quite a bit the other week about how you really liked sort of older Zuko awkwardness. How do you feel about there not being any?
Well, I mean, I think he has like 3 or 4 lines in the whole episode, so that didn't bother me too much. It's the same problem I had, same response I had last week. It was Nadia that really was upset he didn't get to be awkward, and I kind of take the position of like, no one's awkward 100% of the time. He can, as long as keep it up enough that I remember that's his character. Keep it up enough that I believe it's still Zuko, and I do really like. I really like. I do like the way they animated and the voice actor delivered the line, "Wait, you spoke with my uncle." Like, that look on his face is really sad. It's almost tragic. Like, it's like, that longing to communicate with his uncle himself. You feel it. And the actor delivers it brilliantly. Have we credited the actor that does Zuko? I don't think we have. Let me quickly find the name.
Well, not in Korra, but I mean, we definitely have in.
It's a different actor now, isn't it? So it's Bruce Davidson. Does a wonderful job playing Lord Zuko. So yeah, I don't know. I was like, yeah, I think just I don't know. It was like a bum conversation that didn't progress the plot. Korra then acknowledged that was helpful, even though it wasn't in any way. And then we had the moment that immediately followed it, which is the moment that really robbed us of Zuko's reaction to the Iroh thing. And I just was like that 30 seconds of TV really pissed me off. So yeah, there's like 30 seconds
enough.
of this episode that I just did not care for. So yeah, it's a shame, but it is what it is. I've ranted enough. Do you got any other stuff that you want to talk about from this ep?
No. I think we've naturally covered everything.
Let's see if I got any other notes. We figured out that so Zuko is not Fire Lord. He's abdicated at some point, and his daughter is Fire Lord now, which I really liked to hear. That was lovely.
Have we had any kind of confirmation that the mother is his love interest from Avatar?
No confirmation of that. We can assume that, I think, but we don't know that. Maybe the comics covered that, and I've forgotten, but certainly not in either show.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair.
But I loved that. I thought that was neat, and I also like the idea that, like, in a weird way, I think we're supposed to see Zuko as the other side of the coin. Like, yeah, the Earth Queen was like pretty evil. She ate bison and was, greedy and let her people suffer, and while she lived in luxury and blah blah blah. Zuko is supposed to be the opposite. Like, he gave up his power, to his daughter at a younger age, let the next generation take over. There's something like very calming about that. He's obviously, the Fire Nation is clearly not what it was, but you equally know that Zuko would be on Zahir's hit list also, and I guess there's an element of showing Zuko in this episode gives us direct correlation to another world leader, from the Earth Queen, who was really helped Zahir make his point. I guess Zuko is the counter argument, so it's nice to see him in this season of all the seasons. So yeah,
agreed.
Agreed.
And it's always fun to see him.
Yeah, I like having Zuko in the show. This one was a fun moment. I really enjoyed. Why can't you date nice girls like these? Where Grandma was like, she met Korra and she met Asami, and then
So good.
It's so good. Like, it's like the show knows how much we hated the love triangle bullshit.
It's so funny. It's so good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. What else? I really enjoyed when they first arrived. Good, you guys aren't dead, being the response they get from Lin. I thought that was amazing. So good.
And the way he's like, thanks for that, Chief. Like, or whatever he says. He definitely calls her Chief. I can't remember his exact words. But...
No, it's something like that. It's very good. It is weird, actually. I wanted to point out, this is like our 4th or 5th episode that's had scenes that take place at this Misty Palms oasis. Every episode since the stakeout. So I don't know how many episodes that is. Is that 3-4 episodes? All centered around the Misty Palms oasis. It's really odd. Anyway, I don't think I have any other notes. I wanted to ask you a question, actually, before we get onto trivia, Chris. Last sort of larger point, and I'm very curious about this. 2 or 3 episodes back, when they were leaving Zaofu, you were quite excited because you were like, "Oh, proper Team Avatar." It all got a bit muddled up pretty quickly. They got separated about an episode later, and now they're back with the adults again, not on their own. Do you feel like you didn't get what you were excited about, or do you feel like they did enough to deliver on that promise of what that cliffhanger was to you?
I didn't get what I was excited about, but turns out if the quality of the episodes are good, that's okay.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I know it's such a boring answer because it's like, I love how it's always that sort of, whenever you hear discussions on like, is there superhero fatigue? Is there Marvel fatigue? It's like, no, as long as the quality's good, I think everyone's fine. Like, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was a success. It was a good movie. I just think it's kind of like, no, it wasn't what I was after, but I loved the last few episodes, and I really loved this one, so it's fine.
I would say on that point also, though, there is an element of needing innovation as well, I'd say, because I think like something like Blue Beetle that came out this year, which was fine, or The Marvels, which was good, but nothing new. sank like a stone at the box office, right? I've not seen Aquaman 2 yet, but I've had friends who I trust see it, and they said it's fine. It's not as good as the first one, but there's nothing, it's just a pretty typical superhero film. There's an element of innovation needed. I think when we get to something like this point, where we're at a sort of a peak of a genre, sort of ruling our screens for so long, I think to be successful now, you need to be innovative, because we've seen so many superhero movies. It's not that people are tired of superhero movies, it's people are tired of the superhero movies that have the exact same structure and formula as each other, right? They've seen that story 10 times. You need to be innovating if you wish to be capturing people's audiences or continuing to capture people's audiences. And that lack of innovation is really starting to show, I think, across the board. You look at something like Quantum Mania, which I think was poorly written in any way, but had the chance to be very innovative and was not. It became a pretty standard Marvel fare. The closest we got to innovation all year, Christ. Guardians, I guess, because you know what? It did something a superhero movie almost never does: closure. Because comics,
also,
go on, sorry.
I'd also argue, and it's an element of the film that you and I actually disagreed with slightly on how much we enjoyed it, but the structure, the flashback structure, right, with Rocket Story felt unique. And
I think for those listening into this in April or whatever, thinking, why are they talking about like 2023 movies like they've just happened? We're recording this. It's like we're just going from 2023 to 2024. It's like the 4th of January. So I just want to point out that there's a lot of people doing reflecting on the movies of 2023 right now. So that's kind of, I guess, why that's on our mind. But I think applying that point to Korra, I said earlier in the year, or maybe last year, when you were talking about this concern about not having a team Avatar, I said, in principle, not having a team Avatar is fine if they are executing an interesting story with that new structure. But if I'm not doing anything with it, then you're just like, well, at least give me the old thing then. If you're not if the new thing isn't going to be interesting or executed well, then at least give me the old thing. I know I like that. Do you know what I mean? I think that's where that yearning comes from, for nostalgia. It's when the thing you're getting isn't good. So you're like, yeah, okay, you tried a new thing, it didn't work. Can we at least get the old thing? Like if I went to a restaurant and tried a new dish that I hadn't had before and I didn't like it, there'd be an element of, I kind of wish I'd ordered the thing I knew I liked, At least I know what that is. But equally, there's a chance for me to discover my new favourite dish, and that's the way these things work. So I think when you talk about fatigue and stuff, I think that is what it comes down to. It's all about innovation. I think this season really is making use of its structure and its choices, and I think we're getting really good story out of it. So I think this is why we're less concerned than we might have been about the lack of a team Avatar or, the other things that made up the original show. Those story of the week elements, things like that. Not as much of a concern when it's as good as this season has been. So yeah, agreed. Anyway, is it time, Chris?
I think it's time. It's your turn this week, my friend.
I'm waiting. I was getting the okay from you before I triv it up.
I'm gonna give you some trivia.
I put a lot of sound on that P at the end. Triv it up. I wish I hadn't done that.
I enjoyed it.
Awful noise probably on the microphones, but sorry everyone. And then I recreated it 3 or 4 times just to really land how annoying that noise was. Anyway, let's do the triv. So, storyboard artist Natasha Wick's initial boarding of the scene where the airship carrying Macon Bolin's family flies through the Siwong Desert had the vehicle flying in a very erratic fashion, just sort of swerving about. They cut that, I guess, I don't know, for time or just for simplicity's sake, but I didn't need it. That was fine. Once they're in the air, I don't mind that the ship goes in a straight line. That's okay.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
No. Katie Matillia, the writer, she's the one who improvised the "I'll take a nap" line during the audio recording sessions. Now, I even though we covered it earlier, I brought it up again just to name the writer in question and credit properly. So, during his conversation with Bolin over the radio, Milo was originally going to flick away the booger he had picked from his nose. Director Colin Heck is the one who requested it be changed to Milo wiping it under the table he was sitting at. It's a gross moment and a flash of the writing of the previous seasons for Milo there that I did not care for.
Yeah, but I did enjoy the Milo basically ignoring Bolin.
Yeah, Bolin, yes. Yeah.
And then Bolin getting sucked into the bison thing and being like, "Really? You've got all these bisons?" And then Korra being like, "Milo, this is your leader," and him being like, "Okay."
Yeah. This is your captain speaking. Yes, sir. Like, it's great. What I loved, my favorite part is like when he's like, "It's Bolin." He's like, "No, Bolin's not here right now." He's like deliberately being annoying. That part's fine. That part's very funny. I'm on board with that. That's good Milo humor. I care less for the gross out stuff, but children are gross, I guess. So don't at me. I don't care. Children are gross. I won't hear any different. Your little darling bundle of joy might be a darling bundle of joy, but it is also gross. It can be two things at once. Children are gross.
Both things could be true.
I'm not. You know what I mean? I'm not criticizing. But they are, and I think we need to live in a world where people are more willing to accept that that's true. Do you know what I mean? I feel like we're too reluctant to be honest about what it is with kids. They're noisy and they're gross. That's just the truth. Initially, the storyboarding of the action sequence at the Northern Air Temple. The initial storyboarding of the action sequence at the Northern Air Temple was done solely by artist Eugene Lee. Normally, sort of trivial that just like, you know, like that is like it isn't necessarily like worth putting in, but I just want to make sure we give credit to the because the action sequence is such a great part of this episode. I wanted to make sure we shouted out who storyboarded it. So 10 points to Eugene Lee. Good work. So, given the sequence at the Northern Air Temple cuts between various characters at different locations on the mountains, the production crew had to take a lot of efforts to ensure the lighting direction on the characters was consistent with their position relative to the sun and the mountain. So if you're on the other side of the mountain, you're going to be lit differently to the face of the mountain that's facing the light. So they had to be really careful about planning out where everyone was and how they were all lit. And I'll be honest with you, I really respect the time and effort they put into that, but there is no way I would have noticed. There's no way I'm going, wait a minute, this is the west side of the mountain. The sun shouldn't be where it is. You know, there's no way. I'm not that observant.
I don't know whether I'm in the north, south, east, or west. So I definitely wouldn't have noticed it on the show.
But equally, it would have been in the trivia that when in the scene, the Milo and the gang should have been lit from the left-hand side of the screen based on where the sun should have been. But actually, for some reason, they left it on the right side of the screen. Like it would have been in the trivia or the goofs or something anyway. So I appreciate the effort they went to give it consistency and real-world stuff. That's very clever. Again, cleverer than anything I would have both picked up on and, known about. I certainly wouldn't. If I was animating this, it would have all been lit exactly the same. I wouldn't have thought of that, where the sun would be at all. It wouldn't have occurred to me. So apparently when they first got the footage back, Opal was in her Metal Clan attire during the events of the episodes because the production crew had forgotten to design a version of Opal wearing the nomad robes, and they'd sent it off. And it'd just come back with Opal in her metal bending stuff. So they had to do retakes where she was then changed into nomad robes, implying she'd been there for at least a couple of days.
Yeah, which is the impression I got.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Because Opal's the one they threaten, right?
Yeah, they threaten a few of them, but yeah, Opal is one of the people that's like, in trouble, and she's obviously the least experienced as well, which is crazy because obviously she just got there. You know, the other guys have been training for a few
No,
years.
I mean, don't they? Isn't Opal the one that they literally like? They say, "Come," you know. Yes. I think it's the. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to see. I'm trying to find a shot of her at all from the episode. Like, just in the on my, I can't even see her. She's somewhere in the crowd of airbenders. I don't know. Anyway, initial. Oh god, this was a bummer to read, but I'm glad they took it out, so I can't complain too much. But initial storyboards for this episode, Chris, had Boomy using fart bending during his fight with Gazan. Now, this was cut because the creators felt fart bending should be specific to Milo. I'm so glad they took it out for 1,000 different reasons to that. But yeah, that's fine.
I love that they thought about it that seriously. No. Fart bending is Milo thing. We can't take it away from him.
But also, I actually think there's an element of it that I would have at least gone, oh, that's funny. Milo has been partially training these airbenders, so they've learned to fart bend. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that's how I would have taken it, but sure. Oh, dear.
So good.
Yeah, the way Boomy hangs onto the branch to save Kaya is similar to how Sokka hung on to the Fire Nation airship to save Toph in Sozin's Comet Part 3. He was also ultimately forced to let go in order to avoid an attack. So it's a bit of a, as George Lucas would say, it's like poetry, they rhyme. Two moments that sort of fit together. And then the final piece of trivia, the episode's final moment with Tenzin, where the shot pans behind the wall that obstructs the view of him being brutalized by the Red Lotus, went through several retakes, as initially the slow pan movement caused the shot to linger for much longer on the Red Lotus's assault before passing the wall. So basically you saw a lot more of them brutalizing him, and they adjusted it in retakes, and I think for the better, in my opinion.
Yes, yeah. As we discussed earlier, I think for sure, not you that being left to your imagination is effective.
Yeah, the mind's eye, so to speak. So that's the truth, Chris. Are you ready for? I mean, I'm sure at this point, 2-3 weeks on a trot, you've promised a pre-written song for our segment. Give me that feedback, or formerly known as feedback from last series. So surely at this point you've had the time to put something together now. It's been days and days and weeks from the listener's perspective. So, do you want to give us that brilliant song you pre-wrote, definitely, and didn't forget?
Here we go. Give me the feedback. It's 7 a.m. It's 7 a.m. Give me feedback. Feedback from previous years.
It's not even, isn't it only 6? Oh, no, it is. It's 7:30 for you. Brutal.
Yes, Dan. Yeah. Yes, we've been recording for an hour, and it is still only 7 a.m.
This was such a cock-up.
And you're like, oh yeah, give us a song.
Hey Chris, let's do that segment called Chris Shouts a Lot. It's the bit of the show where for 5 minutes Chris just yells at the top of his lungs, I hate my neighbours! It's a new segment. It's going to be very popular.
It would have at least acted as an alarm clock for Jess.
Yeah. Yeah, Jess is like, wake me up at exactly 7:33, Chris. And you're like, okay.
Jess was probably laid in bed at 6 o'clock going, the fucking neighbours, I'm in the same house.
Yeah, she could hear us having this conversation and was really annoyed.
She's like, the neighbours weren't led to your alarm next to your alarm clock at 5:30 this morning.
Anyway, today's feedback comes from Ninjak11. Now, we talked last year, and maybe even in the first year, I'm not sure. Sometimes we get comments on much older episodes, but I still include them anyway, because, if they're a good comment and I want to respond, I don't care where it comes from. By the way, if you'd like to leave a comment, you can go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic, where you can leave a comment under any of the episodes. We've posted them as podcasts on YouTube. You can find them on there and then comment on the underneath if you've got any, and we'll include it in next season. So, this one comes from Ninjak, and it is in relation to lightning bending. So, there was a lot of discussion, and I don't even remember where we landed on it, about lightning bending suddenly being a thing a lot of people could do. And whether that was okay. Because it seemed like it was a difficult thing to do, and you had to be in a certain mindset. But we were debating exactly what Iroh had said to Zuko when he was explaining lightning bending to him. Well, very helpfully, Ninjak has gone and pulled the quote for us. So, Ninjak says, I pulled the episode where Iroh talks about lightning bending to Zuko. Here is, quote for quote, what he says. Lightning is a pure expression of firebending without aggression. It is not fueled by rage or emotion the way firebending is. Some call lightning cold-blooded fire. It is precise and deadly, like Azula. To perform the technique requires peace of mind. Now, well, let me read the rest of Ninjak's comment, because then there's some context. He had some thoughts. So, basically, it is specifically lightning bending he talks about when he says you have to have peace of mind. He also talks to Zuko about... Oh, actually, I'll tell you what it was. We talked about whether peace of mind was just for redirecting lightning or whether it was to produce lightning. So he's clarifying for us here. He also talks about Zuko, about his inability to lightning bend because of his anger, pride, and shame. I don't see Mako in Korra having so much anger, pride, and shame that he wouldn't be able to bend lightning at all. He's a pretty down-to-earth guy, a bit of a mess, but not like not with the deep internal emotional struggles as Zuko had. I've always seen it. And I've always seen it as unless you have some deep emotional trauma, you can't lightning bend, and if not, it's just a matter of being calm while doing it, which most firebenders, would with enough training should be able to do. Redirecting lightning doesn't seem to have anything to do with peace of mind. That's just a water bending form used with firebending that Iroh came up with. And apparently, the fight with Azula was not the first time Zuko redirected lightning. He did it against Phoenix King Ozai, and that was before learning firebending from the Sun Warriors. So that must be in direct reference to something we said at the time. In fact, I don't recall what I said for that to be a counter to, but that sounds correct. So So in terms of the overall stuff, that is interesting. So does that change how you feel about that, Chris? Because we talked a lot about is it acceptable that just half the population, or at least a huge chunk of the population, could just lightning bend now? Because we saw in season 1, there was a bunch of people in a power plant all just lightning bending into a big generator to create electricity for the city. Do you think that much of the city has got the kind of peace of mind that Iroh is describing there? Or do you think Iroh was mistaken about how calm and cold you need to be in the moment?
I think and I can't remember the discussion. So if I'm repeating or saying something that's contradicts how I felt at the time,
Sure.
then apologies.
Yeah.
But I think we've seen a lot of the what feels fairly realistic and logical evolution. Something that seems difficult in Avatar is more widely used in Korra. So metal bending is the other obvious example of this.
Mm-hmm.
That was almost unique to Toph in Avatar, and now is commonplace. And I think that's just the way stuff evolves. And maybe at first it either seemed like or did require that calm and that connection. Whereas now it is evolved that people have techniques that mean they can access it quite instantly, or they can at least make themselves feel that calm for the purpose of lightning bending. Maybe.
Yeah, I think there's a truth to that, and I can't think of too many examples in real world, but it feels like certain skills, just being able to, I don't know, play the guitar might have been impressive a certain amount of time ago, but now a lot of people can play the guitar, and actually it's those people with those really specific crazy. You see these crazy TikTok videos of people plucking at guitars in really unusual ways while they're also creating the beat while they're doing it, and those sort of almost extended versions of skills, and it feels 10, 20 years from now, a lot of people will be able to do that because they'll have watched and learned. And it does feel like when a skill is first being perfected, only a handful of people can do it, and then over time, more people can do it. That feels natural and normal. And maybe when it was something people were less practiced at and understood less, it really did require a certain amount of centering to even touch. But actually, maybe the reality is with a lot of practice, you can almost force yourself into that mental state with almost maybe airbender-like techniques. Even if you are an angry or emotionally traumatized person, you can get your mind at peace enough with control and with practice, just in the moments you need to produce lightning. Even if the rest of the time...
that's how it seems to me.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm landing on it. But I do think it's an interesting discussion. And I really want to thank Ninjak for their contributions. Again, if you wish to do the same, there's a few different places you can get us. You can get us there by going over to youtube.com/NothingButStaticUK, where you can leave comments under the relevant episode. Or, of course, you can send us stuff through email, mail@nothingbutstatic.co.uk. Or if you join our Patreon, you can head over to you can get over to access to the Discord where you can leave feedback there too. Speaking of the Patreon, guess what, Chris? If they go to the Patreon right now, right this second, they can hear our next episode immediately. Mad.
Whoa.
Mad. Absolutely
That
mad.
is mad.
As well as all the episodes of our bonus podcast, Nothing But Lyrics, where we break down the lyrics of I was going to say popular songs. Sometimes popular songs. Sometimes songs you'll go, what's that one? I feel like Tia Lupe from Alien Ant Farm falls into that category quite cleanly.
Yeah, there's a lot of choices that fall into that category. Don't worry.
Yeah. But like, you know, we you know, it's a fun little podcast. We do it once a month, and it's just like we take a look at the lyrics. We sometimes make fun of them, sometimes we analyze them and try to figure out what they mean. Sometimes it's a bit of both. It's great. It's good. Really enjoy that podcast. From there, also you can get obviously episodes of Analysing Avatar. Sorry, Rewind reviews also a week early, the same as Analysing Avatar. And that's one of the ways you can support us. Other ways you can support us, of course, is by heading over to your podcast platform of choice, liking, reviewing, subscribing, whatever options you have. You can do that. That supports us. You could also tell a friend. You could tell a friend you really hate it. That would be a fun thing to do. Lie to a friend. Do that. Just tell a friend it's a podcast about a thing they like. Be like, you're into cars. It's a podcast about fixing up old cars. Just straight up lie.
We've got a segment called we've got a segment called Cars Exist.
Yes, we do. Yes, absolutely. Tell them it's a Cars podcast and just point them our way. No, I'm kidding. But no, yeah, tell a friend if you've got a friend who's into Avatar or evidently Doctor Who and Harry Potter. You know, you could probably send them our way. We talk about them enough. Otherwise, of course, just keep listening. We love that too. That also supports what we do, and we appreciate it. So I think that's everything. I think I did all. Oh no, obviously, Raphodraws, who supplied that brilliant artwork of Appa at sunset. Head over to Instagram.com/Raphodraws to see more of their work and get links to other things they do and are involved in. They don't just draw Avatar stuff, they draw all sorts of stuff, and it's all really good. So go support them because they're awesome. There you go, Chris. We did it.
There you go. That's the stuff.
That is the stuff. I always feel like the end of this podcast is like... I always feel bad because I do the triv and then I do the closing. So whenever I put the timeline for this podcast like together and I can see where talking is happening, it's like I sometimes ramble, so you get these chunks of me in the middle of the episode always anyway, where I just go off my fucking... I lose my mind and just don't shut up for 5 minutes or whatever. But like there'll always be a reasonable back and forth. And then the last 10, 15 minutes of the podcast is just so... And I just look at it and feel really bad. I'm like, Chris just had to sit there while I went through all of that.
Yeah. I see it very much as me time. Don't worry about it.
What are you doing during those moments? Are you listening or are you zoning out? You playing Candy Crush? What are you doing?
I am. I'm Googling. You know.
He's answering work emails.
No, I'm listening. No. I am usually like Googling something, or like, I'm not doing a task of high concentration. But like at the moment, I'm just scrolling through Disney Plus. So you know, don't worry too much.
What? Anything good on Disney Plus at the minute? Like, I don't know.
Mate, there's a lot of stuff I've not watched on Disney Plus. I've really neglected Disney Plus. I've not seen Loki. I've not seen the Santa Clauses series 2. Yeah, there's a bunch. But,
yeah, and the thing with the Santa Claus is you miss it during the Christmas window. Then you sort of go like, oh fuck, can you watch the Santa Clauses in February? Like, I'm not sure you can.
I think you can, but I don't know, because you didn't watch it either?
No, I didn't get around to it. I'm really sad about it. I've been looking at it like, oh no, that's a shame. I really was hoping that maybe I could, I'd be able to do something with that. But like, yeah, no, I never got around to it. Because my whole goal was like, wait till it was all out and then binge it, and I'd never got time. Same. And now I'm playing movie catch up because there's a bunch of movies I missed this year, and I want to try and watch those so I can do some sort of like, I don't know. I thought I might do a ramble log, like my top movies of the year or something. I don't know if I'll actually get a chance to do that, but yeah, it's not going to happen. So while you're talking, Chris, I'm just googling movies 2023 and just seeing which ones I missed. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so that is everything for this week, everyone. Thank you so much for listening and joining us, and we'll see you in a week for more of this. We've got two episodes left. Is that right? We got Enter the Void. And,
yeah, man, it's exciting.
And The Venom of the Red Lotus, I think. So yeah, I'm excited to see how this season plays out. Again, thank you all for listening. We really appreciate your time. Otherwise, I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to review Enter the Void.